One shot, one kill, the Vlek commander muttered, his tendrils quivering in dismay. How can any species be so precise? On the barren planet of KRUX-4, under the dim light of 3 distant stars, the coalition of free species huddled together in a war council. The war had been going well until the humans joined the fray. Now, a new nightmare haunted the coalition's ranks, the human sniper. Perhaps we underestimated them. The Tauran general, a towering mass of hardened scales, grumbled. His voice rumbled like distant thunder, carrying the weight of every defeat his forces had suffered at the hands of these mysterious human marksmen. Underestimated, the commander's voice was almost a hiss, his slit-pupil eyes narrowing. We didn't understand them at all. What kind of soldier kills from such a distance? It's dishonorable. Another alien, smaller in stature but with eyes that flickered like a dying star, interjected. It's not just the distance. They kill without warning, without a chance for us to even see them. By the time we know where they are, it's too late. There was a murmur of agreement among the council. The room, filled with beings of various shapes and sizes, bore the scars of recent conflicts. None could claim to have seen a human sniper and lived to tell the tale. Their only knowledge came from the aftermath. Comrades dropped in their tracks. Casualties counted in seconds. We need to do something, the Tan general insisted, slamming a fist down onto the metal table. The force of the impact made the holographic map of the battlefield flicker. We can't continue to fight an enemy we can't see. Perhaps a cold, mechanical voice cut through the murmurs. It belonged to an artificial intelligence unit, sleek and angular, floating above the group. Perhaps it is not the humans we should fear, but their methods. The room fell silent, all eyes and sensory organs turning towards the AI. It had been a silent observer until now, its input often viewed as too clinical, too detached from the organic realities of war. But now, in the face of an unseen enemy, its insight was sought. They have adapted to a form of warfare that prioritizes efficiency over engagement, the AI continued. For humans, victory is not about the battle, but about the elimination of the target. They are predators, hunters who take pride in their ability to end life with minimal effort. The word predator hung in the air, its implications clear. In the wilds of many worlds, predators are the most feared creatures, beings that can kill without hesitation, without remorse. For the first time, the coalition realized they were not fighting a traditional army. They were facing hunters, and they were the prey. Then how do we fight back? The Vlek commander's voice was almost desperate, his usual confidence shaken. How do we stop them? We can't fight them the way we fought others, the AI responded. We need to change our approach. We must become unpredictable, force them into situations where their precision is meaningless. We need to find a way to draw them out, expose them to our strengths. Or, a voice from the back of the room suggested, we could lure them into traps, make them think they have the advantage, then strike when they least expect it. The idea sparked a discussion, strategies and counter-strategies flying back and forth. But as the council debated, one thing became increasingly clear. The humans had already won in one respect. They had instilled fear, a fear that now threatened to paralyze the coalition's efforts. Meanwhile, far from the war council, high on a ridge overlooking the battlefield, a lone figure lay prone, his body camouflaged against the rocky terrain. Through the scope of his rifle, he watched the movements of the enemy below. They were setting up defensive positions, their movements hurried and erratic. They knew he was out there somewhere, but they had no idea where. A slow, deliberate breath. The sniper's finger tightened on the trigger, not enough to fire, but just enough to feel the cool metal under his skin. His heart rate was steady, his mind clear. He was in no rush. Patience was the key. He could wait for hours, days even, for the perfect shot. And when it came, he would take it with no more thought than one might give to swatting a fly. For now, he waited, watched, and listened. He was just one of many scattered across the landscape, each one a ghost in the machine of war. No one knew his name, and no one ever would. His existence was defined by a simple creed: see without being seen, kill without being killed. Back at the War Council, the discussions were growing more heated. The coalition leaders were desperate, grasping at any strategy that might give them an edge. But deep down, they all knew the truth. They were facing an enemy they didn't understand, one that seemed to defy all the rules of engagement they had known. And on the ridge, The sniper why? Ted, his eyes never leaving the battlefield below. He had all the time in the world. When the moment came, he would strike, and another enemy of humanity would fall, wondering, in their final moments, why they had ever dared to face such a foe. "Another one bites the dust," muttered the sniper as he observed the aftermath through his scope. The alien soldier crumpled to the ground, lifeless, the others scrambling in panic. He knew the effect this would have on them. More paranoia, more fear. They were already terrified, and it showed in every jerky movement, every cautious step they took. He didn't need to hear their panic chatter to understand. It was the same in every battle. The coalition forces were unraveling, their confidence eroding with each shot. A single sniper could decimate their morale, and there were dozens of snipers just like him across the planet, all with the same mission: sow fear and confusion. Down below, the coalition troops were in disarray. Their commanders were barking orders, trying to restore some semblance of order, but it was clear that fear had taken root. The Tauran general, the one the sniper had been watching for the past hour, seemed especially tense. His heavy frame moved with uncharacteristic haste, his eyes darting from side to side, as if expecting death to come from every shadow. The sniper knew that feeling well. He had seen it before in countless engagements, in soldiers far more disciplined than these. It was a universal truth in war. Fear was the greatest enemy. And right now, the coalition was drowning in it. Moving to a new position, the sniper whispered into his comms, his voice barely audible over the wind that swept across the ridge. There was no need for a reply. His spotter, hidden somewhere in the rocks behind him, would pick up the message. Together, they had a silent understanding, a partnership forged in the heat of countless battles. They didn't need words to communicate. Each knew what the other would do without asking. The sniper began to crawl backward, his movements slow and deliberate. Every inch of ground was painstakingly covered, avoiding any sudden motions that might give away his position. He had been in this spot for hours, and now it was time to relocate. A good sniper never stayed in one place too long. To do so was to invite death. As he moved, he couldn't help but reflect on the coalition's efforts to counter them. Traps had been set, ambushes laid, but none of it mattered. The snipers were always a step ahead, always one shot away from turning the tide. The enemy was learning, adapting, but it was a slow process. And every mistake they made was costly. The sniper reached a small depression in the ground, barely large enough to conceal a person. He settled into it, adjusting his camouflage to blend with the surroundings. From this new vantage point, he had a clear view of a different section of the battlefield. The coalition forces were fortifying their positions, setting up makeshift barriers and deploying automated defenses. It was a futile effort, but he understood why they did it. In war, even the illusion of safety was better than none. The sniper adjusted his scope, taking in the scene with practiced precision. Each movement, each deployment of equipment, told a story. They were trying to make themselves feel secure, to believe they had the upper hand. But the sniper knew better. No wall could stop a bullet. No defense could stand against the invisible enemy that haunted them. He zeroed in on a group of Vlek engineers huddled around a portable shield generator. The device emitted a faint, pulsing glow, creating a shimmering dome of energy that surrounded their position. It was an impressive piece of technology, capable of deflecting plasma blasts and railgun rounds. But a human sniper wasn't limited to brute force. A tiny, exposed power coupling on the device's exterior was all he needed. A slow, steady breath. His world narrowed to that single point, the reticle of his scope centered perfectly. A gentle squeeze of the trigger, and the bullet was on its way. The generator sparked and sputtered before exploding in a burst of light, the engineers scattered by the blast. Panic set in once again, the coalition troops scrambling to regroup. The sniper smirked. He wasn't here to kill them all, just to remind them that nowhere was safe. The coalition's desperation grew with each passing hour. The War Council's deliberations had devolved into shouting matches, each leader blaming the others for their inability to counter the human snipers. Suggestions ranged from deploying cloaked drones to saturating entire areas with chemical agents, but none of it felt sufficient. "Enough," roared the Tauran general, slamming his clawed fist onto the table. His voice silenced the others, their attention drawn to his imposing figure. "We cannot defeat them with technology alone. We must understand their psychology. What drives a being to fight in such a way? What motivates this? Ruthlessness? The question hung in the air, unanswered. No one in the room truly understood humans, not their culture, not their history, and certainly not their minds. The coalition had seen their bravery in combat, their ingenuity and strategy, but this was something else entirely. It was as if the snipers embodied a primal instinct, a hunter's single-minded focus distilled into its purest form. "We need prisoners," the AI suggested, its voice calm and clinical. "Capture their snipers. Study them. Perhaps then we can learn their weaknesses." The idea was met with skepticism. Capturing the human snipers seemed an impossible task. They were ghosts, phantoms that melted into the terrain and struck from miles away. But what choice did they have? If they didn't find a way to counter the humans soon, the war would be lost. On the battlefield, the sniper's earpiece crackled to life. A low voice, barely above a whisper, delivered an update. "Command says there's chatter about a trap. Coalition's planning to lure us in." The sniper didn't respond immediately. He shifted slightly, scanning the area through his scope. A trap wasn't unexpected. The coalition had been growing bolder in their desperation, and he had no doubt they would try something. But the thing about traps was that they worked both ways. "Understood," he replied, his voice steady. Let them try. He knew the terrain better than they did. Every ridge, every ravine, every patch of cover was etched into his memory. If they thought they could outsmart him, they were welcome to try. All it would take was one mistake, one misstep, and the hunters would become the hunted. Hours passed as the coalition forces moved into position, their trap carefully laid. A convoy of supplies was sent through a narrow canyon, guarded by a contingent of troops. It was an obvious lure, the kind of bait that no predator could resist. But the sniper wasn't fooled. He watched from a distance, his scope tracing the convoy's progress. Something felt off. The guards were too disciplined, their movements too deliberate. They weren't just protecting the convoy. They were waiting for something. He scanned the surrounding cliffs, searching for the telltale signs of an ambush. A glint of metal, the faint shimmer of a cloaking field, anything that might betray their presence. And then he saw it, a faint distortion in the air, barely visible against the rocky backdrop. Cloaked drones, hovering silently, their weapons trained on the sniper's likely approach. It was a clever trap, but it had one fatal flaw. They had underestimated him. The sniper reached into his pack, pulling out a small device. It was a signal jammer, compact but powerful enough to disrupt the drone's cloaking fields. With a flick of a switch, he activated it. The drones flickered into view, their camouflage failing as their systems were overwhelmed. In the chaos that followed, the sniper struck. A single shot took out the lead drone, its shattered remains crashing into the canyon below. The coalition troops scrambled, their ambush unraveling before it could even begin. By the time they realized what had happened, the sniper was gone, melting back into the landscape like a ghost. Far away, the War Council received the grim news. Their trap had failed, their forces once again outmaneuvered by the human snipers. The room fell into a heavy silence, the weight of their situation sinking in. They were fighting an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't understand. For the sniper, it was just another day on the job. As he moved to his next position, he couldn't help but reflect on the coalition's efforts. They were learning, slowly but surely, but it wouldn't be enough. Not against him, not against the humans. He found a new vantage point, settled in, and peered through his scope. The war raged on, and he had work to do. One shot, one kill. That was all it took to remind the coalition of a simple truth. In this war, the humans were the apex predators, and there was no escaping the hunter's gaze.